Starting off this countdown, we have the helicopter crash. In 2019, 32-year-old Benno Anthony Penna and his wife, Megan Michelle Hawk Penna, went out for a helicopter ride in Utah. Their plan was to fly to South Valley Region Airport in West Jordan. Their ETA was 2 p.m. When the pair failed to arrive, helicopters were sent out looking for them. Shortly before 6:30 p.m. that day, their helicopter was found. Sadly, they had crashed. This photo was posted just a few minutes before the deadly crash. Look how happy the pair look. Little did they know what was soon to happen. Now, authorities don't know for sure what happened, but it was reported that there was some heavy weather in the area that day. So maybe that's what played a role in the crash. It's a very tragic story. In our ninth spot, we have the drowning. On November 11, 2017, fans of the Filipino TV star and dancer Franco Hernandez were heartbroken when they heard the news of his passing. On that day, he was out with his girlfriend and some friends on a small boat. This photo was taken that day just before a wave hit their boat, knocking everyone overboard into the water. Sadly, Franco drowned. The people operating the boat did manage to pull him and his girlfriend back onto the boat, but by that time he was already unconscious. He was immediately brought to a clinic but was declared dead on arrival. This is so sad because everyone was out enjoying their day, having fun. Little did they know what was going to happen. Moving on to number 8, we have the day the music died. February 3rd, 1959 is also referred to as the day the music died, because on that day, Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, and J.P. Richardson died in a plane crash. The three had been on tour together. That day, they boarded the plane and were headed out to the next stop on their tour, but the three men and their pilot never made it. Now the thing is, the trio had been taking a tour bus for the first half of the tour, but they said it was unreliable and freezing cold, so being fed up, they decided to take a charter plane. Had they continued on with the tour bus, they would have made it there alive. This photo was taken of the three artists right before they hopped on the plane. It's the last photo of them. Apparently, the pilot was unaware of a weather advisory that had been issued before takeoff. A short while after liftoff, the plane ran into troubles and crashed. Apparently, the scene of the crash was very gruesome. The three artists had been thrown from the plane in the crash. The pilot was trapped inside of the cockpit. Coming in at number 7, we have the cliff jumping. Several years ago, Naval Air crewman Shannon Nunez decided to take a celebratory jump at a popular cliff jumping spot in Hawaii. She was celebrating her recent qualifications as a Naval Air crewman. Jumping off this cliff was quite common in the area, but it's also very dangerous. The cliff is roughly 80 feet high. She took this photo before her jump. Little did she know what was going to happen. When she jumped, she ended up landing sideways. She then started to panic and drowned. Her two friends that were with her tried to save her, but it was far too late. She was so excited for this jump. She was so proud of herself and her accomplishments. It's just sad that it had to end this way for her. Coming in at number 6, we have the falling rock. This photo features a group of individuals who went out hiking. Little did they know what was going to happen a few moments later. Literally minutes after this photo was taken, a rock above fell and hit the man on the far right in the red shirt. It crushed him completely. He was dead upon impact. All his friends witnessed this happen to him, and that must have been traumatizing. Like, it was such a freak accident. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the Burning Man Festival. The Burning Man Arts and Music Festival is an annual festival that takes place in the Black Rock Desert of Nevada. Tens of thousands of people gather from all over the world for it. Its main attraction is this big effigy that is then lit on fire. Well, during the festival in 2017, a man named Aaron Joel Mitchell ran right into the burning structure. He was burnt alive. To this day, his family does not know why he did this. He was not depressed, nor was he having thoughts of taking his own life. On top of that, a toxicology report showed that he did not have any alcohol or drugs in his system. But Aaron decided to dodge security and then run straight into the flames. Firefighters tried to stop him, but they were unsuccessful. When they did retrieve his body, it was far too late. This is the last photo ever taken of him. It's the moment he took his own life by running straight into the flames. In our 4th spot today, we have the birthday murder. On December 17th, 2017, 21-year-old Ismael Gutierrez and his friends went out for dinner to celebrate his 21st birthday. This photo was taken at his birthday celebration. Gutierrez is the young man holding the bottle. Later that night at around 3 a.m. he had been shot along with a random female. The group had been at the wrong place at the wrong time. Gutierrez and the woman were both taken to the hospital, but sadly he did not make it. And the fact that this happened on his birthday when he just wanted to have a good time makes it 10 times sadder. In our third spot, we have the cabin fire. A couple of years ago, Bethany and her friends decided to go to a cottage. They spent the day out on the lake and then had a nice barbecue dinner. This photo was taken of Bethany out enjoying her time at the cabin. Sadly, 6 hours after this photo was taken, Bethany lost her life. An ember from the grill sparked a fire on the cabin deck. Soon, the whole cabin went up in flames. All the friends were able to escape except for Bethany and a dog. This is why you hug your friends and family extra tight. It's sad, but you never know when their last day will be. In our second spot, we have Cameron Boyce. On July 6, 2019, Disney fans were shocked when they heard that the talented child actor Cameron Boyce had passed away in his sleep. He was taken from us way too soon. He was only 20 when he passed, and he had a bright future ahead of him. Now, Cameron passed away in his sleep due to a seizure which was brought on from an ongoing medical condition for which he was being treated for. Still, no one saw this coming. This photo was one of the last photos ever taken of Cameron. A beautiful photo of a beautiful soul. And in our number one spot today, we have the armed robbery. On September 21st, 2009, Angela Escobar and Alex Santiago were sleeping peacefully when an armed robber entered their home and shot them both dead. The robber proceeded to grab some personal belongings before fleeing the scene of the crime. This is the last photo of Angelina. What a beautiful and innocent soul, taken far too soon. Eventually though, the killer was caught. His name is Christopher Doring. He was caught after taking a phone call in jail. On the recorded call, he admitted to shooting both Angelina and Alex, and then said, and I quote, "I have no sympathy at all, I can do that again. That don't bother me. That just makes me sick to my stomach. Rest in peace, Angelina and Alex." Starting off this countdown, we have the Challenger. On January 28th, 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger broke apart during the flight. It happened only 73 seconds into the flight. This resulted in the death of all 7 crew members. This photo was taken moments before the crew boarded the space shuttle. Like, look how proud and happy they all look. Little did they know that that would be their last final moments, which is extremely depressing. The crew consisted of 5 NASA astronauts and 2 payload specialists. Basically what happened was at 11:39 a.m. the shuttle started to break down over the Atlantic Ocean. It started because of a failure of the O-ring seal in the right solid rocket booster. From there, the right solid rocket booster failed during takeoff. Then the force of the takeoff basically caused the rocket to break apart. Now it's thought that some crew survived the initial breakup, but the impact to the ocean surface would have killed them. In our 9th spot, we have William Sanders. And if you guys like this photo series, then make sure to check out all the other parts to it. William, or Dave Sanders, died a hero during the 1999 Columbine High School shooting. This teacher guided more than 100 students out of the cafeteria during the tragic event. So on April 20th of 1999, 2 high school students entered the Columbine High School with guns and took the lives of 12 students and 1 teacher. That one teacher being William Sanders. So when he first heard of the shootings, he entered the cafeteria and told everyone to leave at once. By the time the killers got to the cafeteria, it was almost empty. He saved hundreds of lives, but sadly he ended up being shot twice. Now, he did end up getting himself into a science lab where the students called 911 for help, but that help never arrived and he sadly didn't make it. This is the last photo taken of him. It was taken from CCTV footage in the cafeteria and shows him ushering students out. He died a hero. Coming in at number 8, we have the Uruguayan Flight 571. On October 13th, 1972, a rugby team along with some family and friends were flying to Chile for a team match when their plane crashed. This photo was taken before this crash. Some of the people in the photo didn't survive. Those that did suffered to survive 72 days in the Andes mountain. What's even worse, in order to survive, they had to eat their dead friends and family members. I can't imagine going through that. Like, what a terrible, terrible incident. In our 7th spot, we have the festival killings. The photo of this couple was taken in 2017 during the Route 21 Harvest Musical Festival in Las Vegas. It was taken right before a man took the lives of 60 people there, including Denise Bertitus, the woman in the photo. She was one of the victims who was shot and died on scene in the arms of her husband. On this day, more than 1,000 shots were fired. More than 800 people were injured. This photo breaks my heart. It was uploaded to Facebook and they look so happy. The first comment reads, "You two," with a heart. The next comment posted 8 hours later is someone asking if they were okay. Sadly, Denise wasn't. In our sixth spot, we have the avalanche. This photo is of a man who is out touring and skiing near a ski resort named Flüsserberg in Switzerland. About an hour later, he died in an avalanche. His wife, who took the photo, managed to survive. According to a post, the man was experienced in hiking mountains. He had previously climbed Mont Blanc. This day, he didn't bring his safety equipment with him because he thought it was only going to be a small hike. And he had hiked that route before. Sadly, this was his last time. They found him 3 hours later after the incident. His wife managed to escape, but the last thing she heard her husband say was, "Get away from me, save yourself," which is so heartbreaking. We're now at our fifth and halfway mark with Joseph Avery. In 1853, Joseph Avery went rafting on the Niagara River with his 2 friends. However, during the trip, the boat flipped. The current had been stronger than they anticipated. His 2 friends drowned, but Avery was a strong swimmer and managed to get a hold of a log that was wedged between 2 rocks. Avery was stuck there holding onto that log for 18 hours. It's because initially no one could hear his screams for help. When people did see him there, it took a while before a rescue went underway. This photo was taken by a bystander. You can see Avery holding onto the log for his life. Unfortunately, it was for nothing. When he got on the rescue boat, it capsized and Avery was swept over the falls. Like, imagine that, surviving for 18 hours, holding on for your dear life, and then when you finally think you're safe, you aren't. So sad. Moving on, number 4, we have Maksud Khan. Maksud Khan was a 20-year-old man that had a fascination with tigers. It all started back in the summer of 2014 during his first trip to the zoo. From there, he became fascinated with tigers and would often talk about them. From there, he would secretly visit the zoo to see the tigers. Sadly, this would lead to his death. In September of 2014, Khan visited the zoo again. This time, he wanted to get up close and personal with the tigers, so he crossed 3 safety barriers to get in. This was the last photo ever taken of him, before the tiger mauled him to death. It was taken by a stunned onlooker who saw the tiger paw at him before dragging his body around and then eating him. Coming in at number 3, we have Moira Smith. Officer Moira Smith is another individual on this list that died a hero. Moira was a police officer on scene during the 9/11 attacks. On this day, without hesitation, she went into the World Trade Center's South Tower and helped to evacuate people. This was the last photo taken of her. It's her alongside one of the victims that she had rescued. 10 minutes later, Moira re-entered the building to help more people escape. Unfortunately, the building collapsed on her. She was one of the 72 other law enforcement individuals who died on this day. May they all rest in peace. Moving on to number 2, we have Leonard Siflete. Leonard Siflete was an Australian soldier that fought during World War II. During this time, he was sent on a mission to Papua New Guinea. But during this mission, him and his partner were captured and handed over to the Japanese, who interrogated them and tortured them. Later, they would behead them. This is the last photo taken of Leonard. It was taken right before he was beheaded. The photo was later found on his partner's dead body. It's a very dark and gruesome photo. And in our number 1 spot, we have Nick and Jack Savage. On June 14th, 2015, mother Becky Savage lost not only 1, but 2 of her sons. A pain I can't even begin to imagine. So on that morning, she was picking up laundry from her son Jack's room when she found him unresponsive. The night before, it was their graduation party and they were hanging out with other friends. When she checked his pulse and found that he didn't have one, she started CPR immediately. Sadly, it was too late. He had passed away from an accidental overdose of oxycodone and alcohol. To her horror, her other son in the basement had also passed the same way. This was the last photo they ever took. It was the night of the graduation party, just hours before their accidental overdose. Starting off this countdown, we have the deadly falls. It's thought that 20 to 30 people die every year by going over Niagara Falls. Between 1850 to 2011, 5,000 bodies were found at the bottom of the falls. That's horrifying. Sadly, 20-year-old Ayana Tokumasu is one of the fall's victims. In 2011, Ayana was visiting the falls with her friends. At first, it's thought that she climbed over the railing and threw herself into the water, but surveillance footage revealed otherwise. The footage revealed that she was balancing on the safety railing to look at the falls, while her friends were taking photos of her. As she was climbing back over the railing, she lost her balance and slipped in. The last photo of her was taken right before she fell in, and it was taken by accident by another couple visiting the falls that day. The couple was having their photo taken, and in the background you can see Ayanu standing over the railing looking at the falls. It's so tragic. Too many people have died trying to take the perfect picture. Coming in at number 9, we have the final goodbye. This is the last photo of a 21-year-old college student named Luke. It was taken by his family members as he headed off to college. Just look at the photo. It's as if he was saying, "Don't worry, Mom, I'll be back to visit." Like trying to reassure his family that he's gonna be okay on his own. Sadly, while driving to college, he got in a car accident. The other driver had been drinking while driving. The car accident took his life. Now this breaks my heart. They probably were already so nervous to send their kid away to college. They said their goodbyes, not knowing it would be their last. Coming in at number 8, we have Connor Cummings. Connor Cummings was a 20-year-old college student and photographer that died doing what he loved. In 2016, Connor and his friend Dimitri climbed up on top of the Four Seasons Hotel to take some photos. This was the last photo taken of Connor by Dimitri. It was taken before he fell 52 stories to his death. On that day, Connor climbed up on the hotel's catwalk to take more photos, but as he was backing up, he slipped and fell. Just another young person that was taken from this world too soon. Moving on at number 7, we have Hank Carr. On May 19th, 1998, Hank Carr was arrested after fatally shooting his girlfriend's son. After he shot him, he took his body to the police and said it was an accident, and that the boy was dragging the gun when it went off. He also lied and said that he was Joseph Bennett, the biological father of the child. Anyway, Hank ended up running from the police station while being chased by police officers. Finally, he was caught and arrested. This photo was taken when he was captured by the police, and it's the last photo taken of him and the 2 detectives in the photo. Just minutes later, Hank used a hidden key to escape his handcuffs. He then killed the 2 other detectives seen in the photo, the one on the left and the one on the far right. He then led police on a huge chase before taking his own life. In our 6th spot, we have the glider plane crash. On August 1st in 1943 in St. Louis, people from all over gathered to see the test flight for a glider plane. Sadly, the test flight didn't go as planned. After takeoff, the plane lost one of its wings. Apparently, a bolt wasn't fastened tight enough and the whole wing came off. The plane then fell 2,000 feet down into a field. All 10 passengers inside passed away. The plane was filled with some notable people, such as Mayor William Becker, the founder of Lambert Airport and the head of the company that built the plane, and St. Louis County Chief Executive. This was the last photo taken of the men. It was taken just minutes before takeoff. What's very creepy is that people who witnessed this accident said the glider went down with a huge thump. There was no explosion or fire, just a very loud thump. That sound has haunted many for years. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the drop-off. This photo was posted to Reddit by the user Tonight As You Sleep. This is the last photo she took of her husband. As he walked into the airport, she took out her phone to take this photo. 2 days later, he was found dead in his hotel room. This is so tragic and sad. Apparently, he passed away from peritonsillar abscess. Basically, it's a bacterial infection from untreated strep throat or tonsillitis. He kept saying he would tough it out and that he was fine, although his wife told him he needed to see a doctor. Eventually, the infection spread to his blood and took his life. In our 4th spot, we have the fatal trip. Tara and Pippa Darlington had worked hard to save up enough money to go on a trip of a lifetime together. They saved their money up and planned for this trip for months. They were accompanied on this trip by their friend Josh Stump. This photo was taken of the 2 sisters while on their 3-month trip around Morocco. They had an amazing time. However, on September 17th, 2012, while on their journey back home to the UK for their mom's birthday, they got in a terrible car accident. Both the sisters were killed. Their friend Joshua managed to survive, but was seriously injured and was in a coma. I tried to find out more of what happened to Josh, like if he woke up from his coma, but I couldn't find anything on it. I just find it so sad that this mother lost both her daughters. Now, apparently the place where the car accident occurred was the same road where there have been 25 other deaths 2 weeks prior. Yeah, 25 deaths in 2 weeks on this road. Something's not right there. That road is not safe. Coming in at number 3, we have George Mallory and Sandy Irvine. George Mallory is known as one of the first people to climb Mount Everest. Sadly, he is also one of the mountain's first victims. So in 1924, George, along with his friend and fellow climber Andrew, or Sandy Irvine, began their ascent of Everest. But to this day, no one knows if they were ever able to make it to the top, or what happened along the way. But they did not return home. This was the last photo taken of the two together. Over the years, several expeditions have been conducted in order to find the two missing climbers. 75 years later, George Mallory's body was found. It appeared as if he had fallen to his death. He was found with a bad rope injury around his waist, which made it seem like Irvine was attached to him and they fell together. But to this day, Irvine's body has never been found. On top of that, George had a bad wound on his forehead. It's thought that when he fell, he died from an ice axe getting plunged into his head. Now, like I said before, it's unsure if the pair successfully made it to the top, but it's thought that they may have. This is because George was climbing with a picture of his wife in his wallet. He said he would leave it at the top of Everest. When he was found, the picture was not on him, meaning maybe they did make it to the top and he put it up there as promised. Also, George was found with his snow goggles in his pocket. Maybe this is because they were making their way back down as the sun was going down, so he took off his goggles so he could see better. But sadly, I don't think we'll ever know what truly happened to the pair. And at number 2, we have Green Boots. Green Boots was the name given to a body of an unidentified male climber that was found on Mount Everest. He was given the name Green Boots for the bright green climbing boots he was found with. Sadly, to this day, his body has never been properly identified, but it's thought to be the body of Sawang Palyor, an Indian climber who died on Everest in 1996. He was seen wearing similar green boots that day. Or it was his team member, Dorji Morup, who was also wearing green boots. I just find it so sad that we don't truly know who this body belongs to. Anyway, this is the last photo taken of the climber. To this day, his body still remains on Mount Everest, and climbers use it as a landmark to know where they are on the mountain. And in our number 1 spot, we have the Bataclan Theater selfie. On November 13th, 2015, something tragic happened that changed the lives of many forever. On this day, 4 terrorists with guns entered the Bataclan Theater in Paris and started shooting. This occurred while people were waiting to watch the band The Eagles of Death Metal perform. This photo was taken by one of the victims, Giles Leclerc. He took a selfie with his girlfriend, Marianne Lebanon, while waiting for the show. The photo was then uploaded onto his Instagram. That was the last photo ever taken of him. When the gunmen entered the theater, some people believed it was part of the performance at first. But Giles knew better. He took his girlfriend and dived to the floor. He shielded her with his body as the shots were firing. He died a hero. 98 innocent lives were taken that day, including Giles. Starting off this countdown, we have the wedding. This story broke my heart. So this is a photo taken of Heather Mosher on her wedding day. She was battling a very deadly case of breast cancer. Sadly, she passed away 18 hours after getting married. So on December 23rd, 2016, Heather was diagnosed with breast cancer. That night, her partner David proposed to her. He said he wouldn't let her go through this alone. 5 days later, they learned her diagnosis was a triple negative. In September of 2017, the cancer had spread, so the two quickly made wedding arrangements. On December 22nd of 2017, the two were married, and just look at how happy Heather is. Again, 18 hours later, she lost her battle with cancer. Moving on at number 9, we have the Falls. Just recently, a man named Roy George was out at Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe. He was there with a friend. He was at the top of the cliff posing for photos when he accidentally slipped and fell over the cliff and into the falls. This was the last photo taken of him, moments before he fell. Apparently, he was taking photos in the spot known as the Danger Zone. You got too close to the edge and fell. Tourists heard his friend's screams and rushed to the scene, but by the time park officials got there, Roy was long gone. In our 8th spot, we have the brain aneurysm. This photo was taken on a woman's wedding. It shows all her friends heading to the venue. This is the last photo taken of the man on the left, the bride's best friend. Sometime during their wedding reception, the man had gotten into an Uber and gone home. He didn't say to anyone that he was feeling off or anything, but he suffered from a brain aneurysm, and a couple hours later he was declared brain dead. The poor bride, on one of her happiest days, lost her best friend. She found out after the reception was over. She said that she spent her honeymoon mourning over his death. Like, that is so scary and tragic. Moving on, number 7, we have The Vacation. This photo was taken by Dave Halley. It was of his wife and daughter aboard the plane headed off to their dream vacation. Sadly, they would never make it. 3 hours after that photo was taken, a missile shot down the plane as it flew over eastern Ukraine. There were no survivors. This just breaks my heart. Like, they woke up early, all excited for their vacation. Little did they know the horrors that were gonna unfold. In our 6th spot, we have the Rhode Island Station nightclub fire. On the evening of February 20th, 2003, a fire broke out at a nightclub. More than 100 people were engulfed in the flames, including one of the guitarists playing that night. 230 people were injured. This photo was taken before the fire broke out. The fire was caused by one of the pyrotechnics, and you can see it in the background of this photo, along with some of the people that passed away that night. Now, this fire spread very fast. Within seconds, the room was filled with smoke and people were panicking, trying to get out. However, this resulted in a human pileup at the exit, and that's why so many people lost their lives that night. Such a tragic accident. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the fatal photo. On July 2nd, 2013, combat photographer Hilda Clayton died while taking photos during a National Army fire training exercise. Unfortunately, a mortar tube accidentally exploded, killing Hilda and 4 National Army soldiers. Hilda managed to capture the blast that killed her. This photo hits deep. No one knew what was gonna happen. She literally captured the thing that killed her and the soldiers. It's so scary. Moving on to number 4, we have The Last Dive. This mother shared the last photo that she took of her son on Reddit. He was swimming in their pool when she captured this photo of him. 5 minutes after that photo was taken, he died due to shallow water blackout. Now, I think this topic needs to be talked about more because I'm a strong swimmer and I've never heard of this until now. Basically, shallow water blackout causes you to faint underwater. It can happen if you hyperventilate before diving or swimming, or if you hold your breath for too long underwater. And it can happen to anyone, even advanced swimmers. Sadly, it happened to this poor kid. Moving on, at number 3, we have the dangerous selfie. Too many people in this series have lost their lives by trying to take selfies, including this next man. So back in 2016, a businessman named Jia Lijun went to a wildlife park alone, and he was super excited to be there. But while taking photos with a walrus, it ended up grabbing him and dragging him into the water. As a result, he drowned. So apparently, moments before this happened, Jia sent a bunch of selfies that he took with the walrus to his friends. Then, out of nowhere, while he had his back to the animal, it grabbed him and playfully dragged him into the water. So it wasn't like the walrus meant to kill him. A zookeeper rushed in to save Jia, but was sadly also grabbed and dragged underwater. They both died. In our 2nd spot, we have SeaWorld. So the first time I heard about this case was through the Netflix documentary called Blackfish. Seriously, a super good documentary, I highly recommend, but also pretty scarring. So on February 24th, 2010, an orca named Tilly for short, grabbed its SeaWorld trainer, Dawn Brancho, by her ponytail and dragged her into the pool. She tried to escape his grip, but when she did, Tilly slammed into her and then grabbed her and shook her violently underwater by her arm. When medics did get to her, part of her arm was already off and in Tilly's mouth. She sadly passed away. Now, before this happened, Dawn had a full show with Tilly. After the show, she fed him and poured some water on his face. She then sat close to him, talking to him and stroking him. They called this relationship session. Family videotaping managed to get Dawn's last few moments on film. And in our number 1 spot, we have the volcano eruption. On December 9th, 2019, Stephanie Browitt and her sister Crystal and her dad Paul were on White Island when the volcano erupted. This photo was taken 6 minutes before the eruption. The 3 of them were on a tour, and it wasn't until they arrived on the island that they found out that the volcano alert level was at 2, which is the highest level it could be before an eruption. But they were on tour with their sea crews, so it wasn't like they could have just left the island. Well, as they were walking back to the boat, they saw ash coming out of the volcano. That's when their guide told them to run. Unfortunately, Crystal and Paul and 21 others died as a result of the eruption. Stephanie survived, but about 70% of her body were covered with 3rd-degree burns. She also lost parts of her fingers. Starting off this countdown, we have the bride-to-be. This photo was taken in June of 2014. It features bride-to-be Colette Moreno and her best friend Ashley M. Theobald. They both were on their way to Colette's bachelorette party. You can tell by this selfie just how excited the two are. But sadly, minutes later, the two got into a car crash. Ashley survived, but Colette didn't. So apparently what happened was the two were driving behind a big truck. The truck's fumes were really bad and was affecting Colette's asthma. As a result, she started having a bad coughing fit. So Ashley decided to try to pass the truck and get in front of it. So she pulled into the other lane and sped up to pass it. But seconds later, a car emerged up a slight hill and the two crashed head-on. After the incident, Colette passed away from injuries from the crash. Ashley was horrified. She said that when the crash happened, she looked over to her friend and she looked completely fine. But clearly, that wasn't the case. It just scares me how quick your whole life can change. Like 1 second, Colette's excited for her bachelorette party, and the next second she's being rushed to the hospital. Moving on to number 9, we have the Selfie Olympics. A few years ago, the hashtag Selfie Olympics was trending. Basically, it pushed people to take elaborate selfies. It led to a lot of people climbing up their doors. In fact, one guy got a blanket and pillow and laid down pretending to be asleep on top of his door. But then we have Oscar Reyes. Sadly, his attempt at the Selfie Olympics took his life. On January 2nd, 2015, Oscar dressed up in a SpongeBob costume and then climbed up on a door in his mother's bathroom. He then took a photo there and uploaded it to Facebook, and it got 200 likes. But later on, when he climbed the door again to take more photos, he slipped and fell and hit his head on the toilet. He passed away soon after from loss of blood. It's so sad how people are literally losing their lives trying to gain attention on social media. I just wish that wasn't the case for Oscar. In our 8th spot, we have the Lost Hiker. This image was posted on Reddit by the user Cheetos Stained Heart. This was the last photo ever taken of her brother-in-law. A couple years back, he had gone camping and hiking, but never returned home. He was missing for a month until someone found his body on the side of the cliff. Beside him was his cell phone and backpack. On the phone was this photo. His death is ruled an accident, and it said that he fell off the cliff while on his adventure. It's just scary to think about how this guy was just relaxing, enjoying the view, and then minutes later, he's plummeting to his death. In our 7th spot, we have the lightning strike. This photo features two brothers, Michael on the right and Sean McQuilkin on the left. The photo was taken just before lightning struck Sean. So the two were in Sequoia National Park, and the photo was just supposed to be a goofy photo. Your hair typically stands up when lightning is about to strike. Little did they know that the lightning was actually going to strike them. Now, this photo was then used as a PSA to warn parents about the dangers of lightning. Now, Sean didn't actually pass away from the lightning strike. In fact, he was knocked unconscious and suffered terrible 3rd-degree burns. Later, he took his own life. Still, this is one of the last photos ever taken of him. Moving on to number 6, we have the ultimate selfie. Again, we see a trend of people trying to take daring and extreme selfies. But honestly, it's not worth risking your life for a photo. Sadly, this was the case for Anna Ursu. Romanian teen Anna Ursu and her friend got on the roof of a train in an attempt to take the ultimate selfie. Sadly, while on top of the train, Anna raised one of her legs in the air and she was struck by 27,000 volts from the wires above her. The force was so strong that it sent her friend flying off of the roof, but she survived. Anna, on the other hand, turned into a human fireball, as sources put it. Later, she passed away at the hospital. 50% of her body was covered in burns. This was the last photo ever taken of Anna. It was taken by an onlooker and witness to the accident. In the photo, you can literally see Anna laying on the train trying to take a selfie with her leg in the air. This was taken mere seconds before she was electrocuted to death. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the bombing. This photo was taken by a photographer on August 15th, 1998 in Oma. The red car captured in the photo contained a bomb that would later go on and take the lives of 29 innocent people and injure 220 others. However, the man and the child in the photo both survived. The photographer did not. It said that the man and child had left the area before the bomb went off. But as for some of the other individuals in the photo, they weren't as lucky and they lost their lives. After the explosion, the photographer's camera was found in the rubble. The pictures he took that day were still in perfect condition. It's just scary to think that he literally captured a photo of the thing that would then later take his life. Coming in at number 4, we have Robert Overcracker. Robert Overcracker was known as a daredevil. He graduated from a California stunt school and then went on to do some daring tricks. One stunt he planned for 7 years. Little did he know that that would be the last stunt he ever performed. On October 1st, 1995, he got on a jet ski in Niagara Falls. His plan was to go over the falls on the jet ski, but then make it down safely with his parachute. However, while doing so, his parachute failed to open. This photo was taken of him just as his jet ski went off the falls. That was the last photo ever taken of him. It was taken seconds before he was torn apart by the unforgiving falls. And at number 3, we have Robert Bud Dwyer. Robert Bud Dwyer was a Pennsylvania state treasurer. He actually became more famous after his death than he was living, and it's for a pretty dark reason. So basically, back in 1987, Robert was accused of taking bribes and being politically corrupt. On January 22nd, he went on live TV for a news conference to discuss these claims, and it was assumed he was going to resign from office. However, at the end of his speech, he took out a gun and took his own life. This photo was taken seconds before he did it. As this photo was taken, Dwyer was backing up against the wall and said, and I quote, please leave the room if this will affect you." He then pulled the trigger. And this was also viewed live by millions of people. It's horrifying. The worst thing was that the next day it was discovered that he was indeed innocent. In our second spot, we have the train selfie. Sadly, this is another case of people that risk their life for a selfie. In October of 2011, 3 girls, Savannah Webster, her older sister Kelsey, and her friend Essa Ricker were standing by some trains taking selfies. The last photo ever taken of them was this one right here. It was uploaded to Facebook with the caption, "Standing right by a train, ahaha, this is awesome." But as they posted this, another train came hurling towards them from the opposite direction. You can see the oncoming train's headlights in the top right of the photo. Before they knew it, the train hit all 3 of them and took their lives. John Anderson, the conductor of the train that hit the girls, said, and I quote, "They were in their own little world." He had blasted the train horn to get the girls' attention, but there was no response from any of them. They honestly didn't hear it coming. He continued on saying, "We watched in horror as we got closer. We saw them for about 12 seconds until they disappeared from our sight, and the train continued moving forward. They tried to stop the train in time, but sadly it was too late." And in our number 1 spot, we have the last free dive. Nicholas Mavoli was known as a daredevil free diver. In May of 2013, he became the first American man to dive down to 100 meters with a single breath. In November of 2013, he attempted to achieve another record. He wanted to reach 236 feet with 1 breath of oxygen and without the assistance of flippers. These photos were taken right after his dive. As he resurfaced, he gave the OK sign, tried to speak, but then he passed out. He never regained consciousness. He passed away from pulmonary edema. Now, look at these photos. He looks terrified. He looks incredibly shocked and in pain. Sadly, those were the last photos taken of him.
And we're starting off the list with the Space Shuttle Challenger. This image here is the last photo taken of the crew right before they took off. They never made it back home. The Challenger was a NASA shuttle and it had 7 crew members. Their mission was to release a communications satellite and study Halley's Comet. The shuttle took off on January 20th, 28, 1986, but just 73 seconds into their flight, the spacecraft disintegrated. The explosion was due to a problem with one of the rocket boosters. It was cold that day, and the rubber O-rings that helped seal the joints in the booster didn't work well because of the low temperature. This caused a leak of hot gas, which led to the explosion. Now, every astronaut knows the risks going into a flight. It's not a job you get into and expect to be 100% safe, but at the same time, it's tough looking at an image like this knowing that they were about to die. Number 9, the Andes flight disaster. Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571 took off on October 13th, 1972, carrying 5 crew members and 40 passengers, each members of the old Christian Club rugby union team. This here is the last photo taken on the plane before it crashed in the Andes. Astonishingly though, 27 of the 45 passengers survived the initial crash. There are a series of photographs of these survivors posing next to the crashed plane. It's a tragic case as many people did die, but in a lot of these pictures, you see them smiling. They look just grateful to still be alive. But there's a darker side to this as well. Out of these 27 survivors, only 16 made it out alive, got back home, having been rescued 72 days later. And in order to survive, they had to make a pretty grisly decision. They resorted to cannibalizing the dead in order to survive. That certainly adds a dark layer to some of these images, but in the end, it is a miracle that 16 of these passengers survived the ordeal. This is one of a series of pictures snapped by 22-year-old Darsh Patel. He was hiking with friends through the Opshwa Preserve in New Jersey when he spotted this black bear and started snapping pictures. In the series of photos, you see this 300-pound black bear moving towards the camera. The friends started to back away, but it continued getting closer, so they decided to separate, running in different directions. When they regrouped later though, Patel wasn't there. 2 hours later, authorities discovered his lifeless body, having been mauled to death by the bear, which was lingering close by. The bear was shot by police, who discovered human remains inside of it. Being rushed at by a bear, one of my biggest fears. I can only imagine how terrifying the last moments of his life must have been here. Number 7, Christopher McCandless. This is the last photo taken of Christopher McCandless, a photo he took himself. On September 6th, 1992, the decomposing body of Christopher was found in a bus he'd been living in just outside of Denali National Park in Alaska. Journal entries by Christopher made it evident that he'd likely died about 19 days earlier. He'd decided to leave civilization behind and live off the grid. He spent 113 days living off the land, using the bus as his shelter. After this time, he decided to head back to civilization. But he was unable, as the river he had crossed was much higher and swifter than it was when he initially ventured in. He returned back and posted an SOS note on the bus reading, "Attention, possible visitors, SOS, I need your help. I am injured, near death, and too weak to hike out. I am all alone. This is no joke. In the name of God, please remain to save me. I am out collecting berries close by and shall return this evening. Thank you. Chris McCandless." It was determined that he had died of starvation. Looking at this image, you can see how gaunt he looks. Apparently he was only 60-something pounds when he was actually discovered. Next up, we have the Titanic. This is one of the last known photographs of the Titanic, taken while it was still afloat. Everyone knows the story here. This supposedly unsinkable ship totally sank. The Titanic disaster happened on April 15th, 1912. The Titanic was a big passenger ship known as unsinkable, but it hit an iceberg on its first voyage from England to America. The ship broke into 2 pieces and sank in the North Atlantic Ocean. Over 1,500 people died, making it one of the deadliest maritime disasters in history. The ship had safety measures like lifeboats, but there weren't enough for everyone on board. The crew didn't have proper training for emergencies, and communication was fairly limited. The iceberg was spotted too late, and the ship couldn't turn in time to avoid the collision. The cold water made survival hard for those who jumped into the ocean, leading to hypothermia and death within minutes. Number 5, we have George Mallory and Sandy Irvine. This is the last photograph snapped of these two mountain climbers right before they began their ascent of Mount Everest. They would never return. George Mallory and Sandy Irvine were British mountaineers who died during an expedition to Mount Everest in 1924. Mallory was an experienced climber, and he aimed to be the first person to reach Everest's summit. On June 8th, 1924, Mallory and Irvine set out from their high camp for the summit, but they never made it back. The exact circumstances of their deaths, it's still not 100% known to this day. Mallory's body was discovered in 1999, well preserved due to the cold climate, but Irvine's body and their camera, which could have contained evidence of a summit attempt, were not found. We still don't know if they reached the summit before they died or if they were descending when they met their ends. Next on the list is Joseph Avery. This photograph, taken in 1853, captures a man named Joseph Avery clutching onto a log for his dear life. Avery had been boating along the Niagara River with two other friends when the strong current caused them to lose control of their boat, crashing it into a rock. The two other passengers were carried off in the current, falling over the falls to their deaths. Avery managed to grab onto a log though, where he spent 18 whole hours. He must have started feeling completely hopeless until finally help did arrive. A rescue boat came to his aid, and he finally let out a sigh of relief. He could just let go of that goddamn log and would go on to live another day. Only he wouldn't, because the rescue boat capsized almost immediately, sending Avery over the falls where his two friends had perished just 18 hours before. I would have just been mad instead of scared at that point, I think. Like, real, after 18 hours, what a cruel fate that would have been. I should have just let go immediately. I spent a whole day here. Oh, anyway, I bet you let out some curse words on his way down. Oh man, sorry buddy. Number 3, the Dyatlov Pass incident. In 1959, a group of 10 students and alumni from the Ural Polytechnical Institute, led by Igor Dyatlov, began an expedition across the northern Urals in what was once then the Soviet Union. It was estimated that their trek would take about 16 days to complete, but the group would never return. A search party was dispatched days after the group had been expected to return home. The search and rescue teams did find the hikers, but not alive, and the cause of their deaths are still a mystery to this very day. First, their tents were discovered. They looked to have been torn open from the inside, and most of their gear remained, but the hikers themselves were nowhere to be seen. The following day, the bodies of the hikers were discovered. They had removed most of their clothing and seemed to have ventured out into the cold for some inexplicable reason. Hypothermia was of course the first suspected cause of death, but the students all had strange injuries that left the rescue team stumped. Bruises were present. One of them had thrown up blood. The last 4 bodies were discovered months later. They had built themselves a shelter, and they were fully clothed, but had suffered lethal wounds as well. They had broken bones and blunt force trauma to the head. Horrifyingly, 2 of them were missing their eyes. There are tons of theories about what happened here, ranging from a nuclear testing accident or secret government experiment to aliens somehow being involved, but yeah, we just don't know for sure. In at number 2 is the South Pole Expedition. Captain Robert Falcon Scott, great name, led a British expedition to the South Pole in 1911 to 1912. On January 17, 1912, after a long, grueling trek, Scott and his team finally reached the pole, only to discover that a Norwegian team, led by Roald Amundsen, had already arrived. This photograph shows them just after they made it to their destination. You can tell they're not only completely disheartened, but in noticeably bad shape. They're frostbitten, they look weak and just fed up. They began the long, torturous return journey across the frozen landscape. Facing severe weather, exhaustion, dwindling supplies, the team struggled to make progress and food shortages became very critical. Edgar Evans died on February 17, 1912, followed by Lawrence Oates, who ended his life by walking out of the tent into a blizzard. Scott and his remaining companions, Edward Wilson, Henry Bowers, and Edgar Evans, pressed on, but Their physical condition just continued to get worse. They were trapped in their tent for 9 days by a storm, unable to go anywhere, and they eventually died in the tent, just 11 miles from a supply depot. Scott's last diary entry was dated March 29th, 1912. Coming in at our number 1 spot, we have these portraits of some of the crew in John Franklin's polar expedition. These photographs were taken just 3 days before they set sail. John Franklin and his crew embarked on their expedition in 1845 to find the Northwest Passage, a sea route connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans through the Arctic. The expedition included 2 ships, the HMS Erebus and the HMS Terror. However, both ships became trapped in ice off the coast of King William Island in the Canadian Arctic. The harsh conditions took a toll on the crew. Franklin died in June 1847, probably from exposure and starvation. With their ships immobilized by ice, the crew attempted to survive on land, and over the next few years, many of the crew members succumbed to starvation, exposure, and diseases. In desperation, some had resorted to in an effort to find help. Some crew members set out on foot, but none survived. In total, all 129 men on the expedition perished, and the ships themselves were abandoned in 1848, and the crew left behind written records of their struggles. The remains of the expedition's members were discovered by search parties, and investigations revealed these tragic circumstances of their deaths.
Coming in at number 10 is Michael Rockefeller. Michael Rockefeller, the son of New York Governor Nelson Rockefeller, was 23 when he began dabbling in art collecting and travel photography. In November 1961, he traveled to the jungles of New Guinea to spend time with the native Asmat tribes when he went missing. Now, despite a 2-week search and a witness who supposedly saw him swimming in the ocean, his body was never found. His official cause of death was noted as drowning, but conspiracy theories range from being kidnapped to going native to even being eaten by sharks. Another big theory is that he was eaten by people, as the Asmat tribes were involved in that practice, and they sometimes ended people's lives as a part of rituals. It's also been said that his boat overturned near the Asmat region of the island, and he swam to shore to look for help, and that's when he was attacked, as nobody ever saw him again. There have been some members of local tribes who've told stories indicating that Michael's life was ended upon reaching the shore, and that his body was cut up and the parts were handed out as gruesome trophies. Regardless of how or what happened, it will forever remain a mystery. Number 9. Prime Minister Harold Holt. On December 17, 1967, Harold Holt, the Prime Minister of Australia, disappeared while swimming in the sea. His last photo of him is him actually swimming. He was with others and he knew the area well, and he had swum there many times before, but it seems like he swam into deeper water and was dragged out to sea. The others called out to him, but he did not raise his arms or cry for help. He soon slipped under the waves and was out of sight. The Victoria Police were contacted and initiated what became one of the largest search operations in Australian history. The entire Australian Defence Force was put on high alert, and an enormous search operation was mounted in and around the beach with helicopters, watercrafts, police divers, and 2 naval diving teams, and more than 340 people were involved in the search. Strangely, his body was never recovered, and it is generally agreed that his disappearance was a simple case of accidental drowning, but a number of conspiracy theories surfaced since. A 1968 story in the Sunday Observer claimed that Harold had been assassinated by the US Central Intelligence Agency, supposedly because he intended to pull Australia out of Vietnam. Also, suggestions were made that Harold had his life ended by the North Vietnamese after being incapacitated by a nerve agent, or that he had faked his own life to be with a lover. In 1983, British journalist Anthony Gray claimed that Harold was a lifelong spy for the People's Republic of China. According to Anthony, Harold faked his own death to defect to China and was collected by frogmen who dragged him into a waiting submarine. Yeah. Now, regardless of what actually happened to him, this disappearance was extremely strange, and it seems like we'll never get answers. Number 8. Bison Dele. Before he changed his name, Bison Dele was basketball player Brian Williams, a 6'11" mountain of a man who was an amazing player in the NBA. He then quit sports and soon left the States at age 30. He stayed away from the US for years, raising hell in Australia, where he learned to sail and bought himself a boat named the Hakuna Matata. He decided he was going to sail it clear from Tahiti to Hawaii. On July 7, 2002, Bison set sail with his girlfriend Serena Carlin, the ship's captain Bertrand Saldo, and his older brother Miles DeBoard. The last known photo is of him and Serena on Bora Bora Beach. Now, unfortunately, the group never made it to Hawaii as Bison, his girlfriend, and the captain vanished at sea. 2 months later, though, his brother Miles was arrested in Phoenix trying to buy gold with one of his brother's checks. Released on bail, he ended his own life, and it was suspected that he ended the lives of all three on board the ship, as he was allegedly a bitter guy who was prone to violence and envied his brother's success. It's said he most likely ended their lives and dumped their bodies in the Pacific. Now, to this day, their bodies have never been found. Number 7. Hale Boggs. At the time he went missing, Hale Boggs was one of the most famous politicians in America. A Democrat from New Orleans, Hale had sat on the Warren Commission investigating JFK's assassination before becoming House Majority Leader during the Nixon years. He was thought to be an alcoholic, and he became famous for doubting the lone gunman theory in the JFK shooting. Now, Hale Boggs was kinda a big deal in 1972, hence the nationwide shock when he disappeared. On October 16th that year, he was in Alaska helping a fellow congressman's re-election bid. The two got on a light aircraft heading for remote Juneau, and they were never seen again. The weather was terrible that day, and as soon as Hale failed to show in Juneau, everyone guessed what had probably happened: they crashed. What was then the biggest search operation in US history was launched, with 90 planes searching 325,000 square miles of Alaska. But no trace of the missing aircraft or its occupants was ever found. To this day, there are some people out there who think Hale was assassinated for his work investigating the JFK assassination. Number 6. Scott Smith. Canadian band Loverboy was one of the biggest rock bands of the early 80s, and Scott Smith was a founding member, staying with the group all the way until his mysterious and frightening disappearance at sea on November 30th, 2000. After playing with his band in Vancouver, BC, Scott, two friends, and his girlfriend set out to Mexico on their 37-foot sailboat. As they sailed down the coast and neared San Francisco, the weather got rough, and one of them estimated that a wave to be around 20 feet high knocked Scott off the deck of the vessel and into the water. Coast Guard helicopters arrived within 20 minutes and dispatched 2 search boats, which scoured a 133 square mile area to no avail. When fog and continuing high waves ended that search, Scott's family paid for a private search by a San Francisco company, and that too proved fruitless. Now, to this day, his remains have never surfaced. Number 5. Joe Pitchler. In the late 90s and early 2000s, child and teen actor Joe Pitchler appeared in a series of small and supporting roles in a number of movies and TV shows, most notably as Brennan Newton in the Beethoven family film franchise. Now, according to the Charlie Project, Joe spoke with a friend at about 4 a.m. on January 5th, 2006, in his northeastern Washington hometown of Bremerton. A few weeks before his 19th birthday, he left his apartment untouched, unlocked, and with the lights on, and apparently only took his wallet and car keys before he disappeared without telling anyone where he might be going, apart from some poems that spoke to his depressing mindset. 4 days later, Joe's Toyota Corolla was located in Bremerton, and authorities suspected that Joe may have jumped to his death off a bridge over the Port Madison Narrows, but no evidence of that nor his remains were ever recovered. Number 4. Patrick McDermott. Patrick McDermott worked as a cinematographer on a handful of short films in the 2000s, but he was far more well known for his personal life, as he was involved romantically with Olivia Newton-John on and off. According to the Telegraph, Patrick was on board a Mexico-bound chartered fishing boat called the Freedom of California in June 2005, but didn't make it back with the ship. Philip Klein, a private investigator hired by the NBC investigative news show Dateline to find the 48-year-old
28-year-old cameraman, theorized in 2009 that Patrick faked his death and vanished as to cancel out substantial debts and to allow his son to cash in on a $150,000 life insurance policy. Philip firmly believed that Patrick was alive, citing 17 credible reported sightings, many of them from Cabo San Lucas, Mexico, the last place Patrick was seen alive. Now, according to the CBC, another investigation ruled that Patrick had likely drowned in the Pacific Ocean. However, in November 2017, the Australian magazine New Idea and other tabloids published pictures purporting to be Patrick alive and well, but a Canadian man named Wes Staub refuted that claim, proving that he was the guy in the photos, not Patrick. So, is he well and alive? No one seems to know. Number 3. Amelia Earhart. In the 1930s, Amelia Earhart was an American hero and one of the most famous people on the planet. In 1932, according to the National Women's History Museum, Amelia became the first woman to fly across the Atlantic Ocean unaccompanied, and she was awarded the Cross of the French Legion of Honor and the American Distinguished Flying Cross, among other achievements. In 1937, she set out on a journey that would prove ambitious and mysterious. She aimed to be the first woman to fly all the way around the globe. Alongside her navigator Fred Noonan, she departed Miami on June 1st, and by July 2nd, they made it to New Guinea with plans to hit Howland Island, a small uninhabited landmass between Hawaii and Australia. Now, sometime en route, Amelia, dealing with poor weather and low fuel, lost contact with a Coast Guard liaison. Her plane never landed and it was never discovered, nor were Amelia or Fred, despite a giant Coast Guard and Navy search effort that encompassed 250,000 square miles. Now, her last photo was done by a photo shoot she did days before she disappeared. Number 2. Richie Edwards. Manic Street Preachers guitarist and songwriter Richie Edwards disappeared without a trace in February 1995 when he was 27 years old. He was due to fly to the United States on a promotional tour of the Holy Bible. Although there were several theories about his disappearance, his highly publicized drug and alcohol use led people at the time to believe that he died by taking his own life, but the investigation itself has received criticism. In his 1999 book, Everything, a book about Manic Street Preachers, Simon Price states that aspects of the investigation were far from satisfactory. He asserts that police may not have taken Edwards' mental state into account when prioritizing his disappearance, and also records Edwards' sister Rachel as having hit out at police handling after CCTV footage was analyzed 2 years after Edwards vanished. Price records a member of the investigation team as stating that the idea you could identify someone from that is errant nonsense. While his family had the option of declaring him legally dead from 2002 onwards, they chose not to for many years, and his status remained open as a missing person until November 23, 2008, when he officially became presumed dead, but according to the police, Edwards is still considered a missing person. And coming in at number 1 is Sean Flynn. Photojournalist Sean Flynn went missing while abroad in the 70s. Sean, who was 28 at the time, and a group of journalists were in Ho Chi Minh City, then called Saigon, for a government press conference when a fellow reporter claimed he got a tip that the Viet Cong, a communist movement and United Front organization, were nearby. According to reports, Sean and photographer Dana Stone chose to travel on motorcycles instead of the limousines that the majority of the other journalists were using for traveling. Night reporter Steve Bell took the last known photo of the pair as they decided to walk on foot near the forest line where the checkpoint was to check it out, and the pair were never seen again. Now, 4 other international journalists were kidnapped by the Viet Cong on the same day, April 6, 1970, but Sean and Dana were never found. His mother spent a lot of her fortune searching for her son, who was legally declared dead in 1984.
So the first photo we're taking a look at is this one here. On February 3rd of 1959, musicians J.P. Richardson, also known as the Big Bopper, Richie Valens, and Buddy Holly tragically died in a plane crash near Clear Lake, Iowa, in what is famously known as the day the music died. This is the last photo taken of the 3 before boarding their final flight. The musicians had been traveling on a small Beechcraft Bonanza airplane, chartered after their tour bus broke down. The plane, piloted by Roger Peterson, took off from the Mason City Municipal Airport en route to Hector Airport in Fargo, North Dakota. The weather conditions on the night of the crash crash were poor, with a combination of snow, sleet, and fog, and despite these conditions, the flight took off anyway. The plane crashed only a few minutes after takeoff, around 1 a.m., into a cornfield near Clear Lake. There were no survivors. If you like videos just like this, creepy paranormal stuff, cryptid stuff, ghost stuff, we got it all, so hit that subscribe button and don't miss out. Next on the list is the 1943 glider crash. This is the last photograph taken of William D. Becker, the former mayor of St. Louis, along with several other prominent men in the community, right after boarding a brand new Waco CG-4 glider, manufactured by William B. Robertson, also pictured here. This was going to be the first public demonstration of the aircraft taking flight. Spectators watched from Lampert St. Louis Airport as the men boarded the glider, and what they didn't know was that they were witnessing the last moments of these men's lives. The glider was taxied by a plane to a runway for takeoff. They took flight, and once ready to allow the glider to glide, the towing cable was released. Almost immediately after the glider was released, though, something terrifying happened. Its right wing completely snapped off. Now, a wing snapping off of an aircraft spells disaster no matter what type of aircraft it is, but keep in mind these gliders were engineless, created specifically for the war efforts to be released like this and then glide down, usually into enemy lines. So now, completely on its own and missing a wing, there was no way for it to make a safe landing. It just plummeted towards the earth, crashing into the ground. All 10 men aboard died on impact. Next up, we have the death of Robert Overacker. Robert Overacker was a daredevil from Camarillo, California. At 12:35 p.m. October 1st, he attempted to go over Niagara Falls on a jet ski with the intention of raising awareness about the homeless. And during his attempt, Overacker wore a life jacket and was carrying a flag promoting a charity for the homeless. He had also intended to deploy a parachute at the last moment to escape the fall, but the parachute didn't deploy and he plunged over the falls. This photo was taken just as he went over. He was only 39 years old. Number 7, George Mallory and Sandy Irvine. On June 8th, 1924, British mountaineers George Mallory and Andrew Sandy Irvine went missing on Mount Everest during their attempt to reach the summit. Mallory and Irvine were part of the British 1924 Mount Everest expedition led by General Charles Bruce. The pair were last seen by their fellow climber Noel Odell at an elevation of around 28,000 feet on the northeast ridge of the mountain. The weather on Everest that day was unstable, very overcast, with snow making for low visibility. After Mallory and Irvine failed to return to their camp, search parties were sent out, but no trace of them was found. Several expeditions in the following years attempted to locate Mallory and Irvine's remains and their camera, hoping to find clues about whether they reached the summit, but it wasn't until 1999 that Mallory's body was discovered on the north face of the mountain. The last photo snapped of them was taken by Noel Odell right before they began their ascent. Japan Airlines Flight 123, a Boeing 747, crashed on August 12th of 1985, taking the lives of 520 of the 524 people on board. The crash was caused by severe structural failure, which led to a rapid decompression and loss of control. The last photo recovered from the crash site was taken by one of the passengers on the flight. In the photo, passengers can be seen wearing oxygen masks. The accident was caused by the rupture of the aircraft's rear pressure bulkhead, which separated the pressurized cabin from the unpressurized tail section. The bulkhead had been improperly repaired after a tail strike incident 7 years earlier. And the failure of the rear pressure bulkhead led to a sudden and explosive decompression inside the cabin. Decompression caused damage to control cables and systems, making it almost impossible for the pilots to maintain control of the plane. The craft eventually entered a rapid descent and crashed into a mountain range. There were actually more than 4 passengers who survived the initial crash, but they died after several hours waiting to be rescued. Japan Airlines Flight 123 crash is one of the deadliest single aircraft accidents in aviation history. Number 5, Snake Man. This is the last photo taken of Ali Khan Samsudin. He was known as the Snake King after he spent 12 hours a day for 40 days living with 400 cobras in a small room. He also stayed in a small glass enclosure with 6,000 scorpions for 21 days, earning him the title Scorpion King. His 2006 performance in Kuala Lumpur would sadly be his last, though. During his show, he was bitten by a king cobra, one of the deadliest snakes in the world, with venom powerful enough to take down a full-sized elephant in a matter of hours. Samsudin had been bitten before. He'd even suffered a couple cobra bites before and made it out alive, but this time he didn't recover. His condition just got worse and worse, and the Snake King died in the hospital 3 days later. Next, we have the last photo of Mayinga Naseka. Mayinga Naseka was a nurse in Zaire, now the Democratic Republic of Congo, during the 1976 Ebola outbreak. She contracted the Ebola virus while treating patients at Mambalad Hospital in Kinshasa. She caught the virus while treating a nun who had been flown in from Yambuku Mission Hospital, where the initial outbreak began. Naseka's case became widely known as she was one of the earliest identified healthcare workers to be infected during the outbreak. And in this photo, you see her standing with another nurse tending to a patient. She died just a few days after this picture was taken. The nurses weren't given the proper protective equipment, and there hadn't been any proper precautions taken to prevent contact with the nun's blood or fluids, because at the time, it wasn't known just how deadly the virus really was. Next up, we have the 1961 US figure skating team. This is the last photo of the US figure skating team, which was taken at the airport shortly before they boarded Sabina Flight 548. In the photo, team members appeared in high spirits, smiling, posing for the camera. Little did they know that this would be the last moment captured before the tragic event that claimed their lives. On February 15th of 1961, Sabina Flight 548, a Boeing 707 aircraft, crashed while attempting to land at Brussels Airport in Belgium. The plane was carrying the entire team, along with coaches, officials, and other passengers. The crash resulted in the tragic loss of 72 people on board. The cause of the crash never been 100% determined, but the most likely cause was a failure in the plane's flap system combined with poor weather conditions. The pilot struggled to maintain control during the landing attempt, leading to the deadly accident. Alright, next up we have the last photo of Christopher McCandless. On September 6th, 1992, the decomposing body of Christopher McCandless was found in a bus he had been living in just outside of Denali National Park in Alaska. McCandless had embarked on a journey to leave civilization behind and live off the grid. He spent 113 days living off the land, using the bus as his shelter. His journal entries were discovered, and it was likely he died about 19 days before his body was discovered. After living in the bus for over 3 months, McCandless finally decided he was going to try and make his way back to civilization. But this was unfortunately not going to be as easy as he thought. The river he had crossed to reach the bus was now much higher and swifter than it was when he first ventured in. He decided to turn back, left an SOS note on the bus reading, "Attention possible visitors, SOS, I need your help. I'm injured, near death, and too weak to hike out. I'm all alone. This is no joke. In the name of God, please remain to save me. I'm collecting berries close by and shall return this evening. Thank you, Chris McCandless." McCandless succumbed to starvation while waiting for help that never arrived. When his body was discovered, he appeared extremely gaunt, reportedly weighing only around 60 pounds at the time of his death. And finally, we have Princess Diana. This photo was taken by paparazzi in August of 1997 in Paris. Pictured here is Princess Diana, Dottie Fade, her driver Henry Paul, and bodyguard Trevor Rees-Jones, right before a fatal car accident. Rees-Jones was the only survivor. Princess Diana and Dottie Fade were in a romantic relationship. They had been vacationing together in the French Riviera when they were pursued by paparazzi. As they left the Ritz Hotel in Paris, their car was chased by paparazzi photographers on motorcycles trying to capture images of the couple. In the Pont d'Alma tunnel, the car lost control and slammed into a concrete pillar. The impact of the crash was severe, leading to the deaths of Princess Diana and the other two in the car. Of course, the bodyguard did survive though. The aggressive pursuit by the paparazzi was widely criticized. Some people blamed them for indirectly causing the accident due to their relentless chase, something that I definitely agree with. I hate paparazzi. Like, just come on, get a real job, honestly. Guys, be careful when you're taking selfies. There's so many dangerous situations you can get into while, looking at your phone. out in the open.
Bit of a lesson.
Be careful.
Starting off our list today with a volcano selfie to die for. Literally. Earlier this week, a woman died in Indonesia while trying to take a photo on the edge of an active volcano, Mount Ijen in East Java, known for its iconic blue flames. The 31-year-old woman named Huang Lihong had joined her husband on a sunrise hiking tour of the volcano. When the pair reached the summit, she wanted to commemorate the moment, but before the picture could be snapped, Huang slipped and fell directly into the volcano's crater. She died on impact after falling 75 feet into the mouth of Ijen.
One time you should absolutely never take a selfie is while flying a plane, but that's exactly what happened in 2014, leading to the deaths of both men on board. On May 31st, 2014, a 29-year-old pilot named Amrital Singh was flying over Colorado with one passenger, a musician who'd been in town for a show. He'd been taking photos and selfies with his GoPro, which was found at the crash site. There didn't appear to be anything wrong with the plane, so it looked like he'd been distracted, leading to the accident. He likely developed spatial disorientation, lost control of the plane, which went into a stall and spun before crashing into a wheat field down below. On top of these selfie distractions, it looked like Singh hadn't been trained to deal with stalls. His logbooks also didn't show he'd been qualified to fly at night with passengers.
Next up, we have a caddy selfie that almost cost the life of a 30-year-old woman at an Arizona zoo. The incident took place in 2019 when the woman, whose name was not released by the zoo in an effort to protect her identity, decided to sneak inside the barrier of the jaguar cage in order to get a selfie. After making it past the barrier, the woman walked over to the small fence, which was now all that separated herself from the massive animal. As she raised up the arm holding her phone, her other arm was swiped by the jaguar and slashed almost right open. The woman can be seen in a video after the incident rolling around in extreme pain, screaming and crying as the zoo staff attempt to attend to her injuries. Luckily, the event didn't prove to be fatal, just incredibly painful. The woman did later reach out to the zoo and apologize for her actions and for the backlash the zoo had been receiving since the incident. I really hope she learned her lesson because that whole situation could have gone way worse.
Texting and driving is bad enough, but taking a selfie while driving, that's pure recklessness. And in this case, it led to the death of an innocent cyclist. In August of 2014, Matthew Kelly Strand faced charges of negligent homicide in Steele County District Court after a tragic incident. The North Dakota Highway Patrol investigated a collision that resulted in the death of Lisa Knudsen, a cyclist from Portland. Strand had been distracted taking a selfie right before the collision. The selfie was taken at 6:48 p.m. and then analysis of his pickup truck's data showed that he veered over the fog line and rumble strip and failed to brake before colliding with Knudsen, who was riding her bike right ahead of him. Strand first claimed he was distracted by a nearby vehicle and people at a farm, but there was no real confirmation of this. He also admitted to deleting photos from his phone. In defense, Strand's mother argued that Knudsen had shared some responsibility, saying that she'd been biking in a lane instead of on the shoulder, which she deemed was a stupid place to cycle.
Next up, a young couple who took a fatal fall after attempting to capture an adventurous photograph for their Instagram feed. Meenakshi and Vishnu loved to travel, and they loved to document their travels as well, and their trip to Yosemite was no different. The couple climbed up to the top of Taft Point in the national park before setting up their tripod over the high cliff. The photo snapped, and then moments later the couple fell 800 feet down the steep side of the cliff. Their bodies were found days later after tourists had noticed their abandoned camera equipment and alerted the park authorities, who warned other park goers of the dangers of standing on the edges of cliffs in areas that experience such strong winds.
Next up, we have the grenade. In January of 2015, in the Ural Mountains of Russia, two hikers came across a grenade. They didn't know that it was still alive. The men decided to take a selfie posing with it pin pulled out and it went off, killing them instantly. The phone with the picture was left intact. But this isn't the only time someone has died in Russia trying to take a picture with unexploded ordnance, especially a grenade. In 2017, a man named Alexander Chechnik sent a picture to several friends of a grenade he was holding with the pin pulled out. The grenade ended up going off, taking out his entire lower body. Police suspected he'd done it as a stunt, planning to reinsert the pin, but just wasn't able to in time.
Next up, we have an incident that took place in 2018 involving a man, a camera, and a bear spotted on the side of the road. On his way home from a wedding, Prabhu Batara spotted an injured bear on the side of the road in India. He stopped the car and hopped out despite warnings of danger from his fellow passengers. Phone camera in hand, he cautiously approached the wounded animal. First mistake. He got closer until he was within arm's length of the animal. Second mistake. The bear struck Prabhu and a fight broke out between the two. At one point, a stray dog stepped in to protect the man from the bear, but it didn't help and Prabhu died before forest rangers could arrive at the scene. In a public statement released by one of the rangers, it was stated that the man had died on the spot, but that the bear was being treated for its injuries.
Alright, word to the wise, do not attempt to climb into animal enclosures at the zoo, especially not with lions, and especially not just to snap a picture of yourself. Yes, this is another animal case. This next story just happened in February of this year. A 38-year-old man at a zoo in India climbed over the fence around the lion enclosure in order to get a picture with the creatures, and guess what happened? He was immediately attacked by one of the lions and lost his life. The incident happened at a zoo in Andhra Pradesh. A worker had actually told the man not to climb the fence, but the guy tried anyway and made it over and into the enclosure this time. Before the caretaker had any time to react, one of the three lions, named Donglapur, pounced on the man and mauled him to death. Now, of course, this is a very unfortunate and sad case. I think the man was under the influence too, but still, I wouldn't think anyone would need to hear this, but apparently some need the reminder. Wild animals are dangerous. Don't invade on their space. Nothing good will come of it. And what sucks in situations like this is that the animals end up usually having to pay the price too, even though they're just defending themselves out of fear.
Next up, we have a 21-year-old man who died in Mexico City after attempting to capture an impressive snapshot. Prior to his death, Oscar Otero had been known to post photos to his Facebook, posing next to what he described as impressive items. But unfortunately for Oscar, in 2014, the impressive item he chose just so happened to be a loaded handheld weapon. After a long night of drinking with friends, he pulled out his camera and began posing with the item in the hopes of getting a cool photo for his Facebook feed. Okay, I'm sorry, but I would literally unfriend someone so fast if they posted something like that on their timeline. During his attempt to capture the image, Oscar was playing with ways to hold the weapon when all of a sudden it went off. A neighbor heard the sound and called police, who arrived on the scene while Oscar was still alive, but unfortunately on the way to the hospital, the young man did die of his injuries.
Some of the most common causes of death while taking selfies are falls, drowning, and accidents with trains. This next incident is one of the latter. A 22-year-old man in Serbia lost his life while attempting to recreate a scene from his favorite movie, Barking at the Stars. He had the idea of running in front of a train, aiming to beat it and be celebrated as a hero, mirroring a scene from the film. But as he dashed in front of the train, he also tried to take a selfie to capture the moment, and sadly the high-speed train struck him with full force. The impact was fatal and he was killed instantly.